Yeah. Well, welcome to Rich Text Editing with YUI. I'm Dave, the guy who wrote it. So I'm going to jump right into it and ask you guys, how many of you guys have ever tried to implement a rich text editor on a website? Okay. How many of you guys have ever tried to extend one? Okay, not quite so many hands. It's a little bit of a pain, right? It's very painstaking to try to extend it and make it do things that you really want it to do. So what I'm going to talk about is first I'm going to start off with Simple Editor. Out of the box, what do you get? Sort of. Simple Editor was designed to work with various YUI controls, whether they were on the page or not. So from the start, we're going to just try to make it work. Basic and simple, very simple editor right on a form. So we've got a standard form here, first name, email, message. When you post this thing here's your HTML. So we got all of our HTML in here. You're going to notice the one thing we've got our text area in here with an ID called message. Somebody comes along, fills out the form, posts it. This is what you're going to get on the server. You get name, email, message, just as you would normally expect to get. Now, we're going to include a little bit of the YUI goodness here. Got 4 lines of code for you. We're going to actually call the simple editor on the ID of message, and we're going to have it handle the submit. So now our form looks like this, with the 4 lines of code. They fill it out, they post it, and we get the same thing on the server. We get name, email, and message. Completely identical to what we got in the first place. The only difference is that our message now contains HTML. All you had to do, 4 lines, done. That was easy. So what if I wanted form validation? That's a big question, because we have a lot of forms that you want to go through. And what if you didn't want the editor to handle your submit? Because you want to do all your form validation, and you want to take care of a few things before the form actually gets submitted. So here, we've got a little example of maybe you would attach a submit on a form, and you would put your validation code in here to check the things out. Well, we can go in and we can add this one line, editor, save HTML. And what it's going to do is it's going to actually process all the information inside the editor, throw it back into the text area. So then you can continue to do your validation code below and have valid data inside your text area like you normally would. So one line to add in, and you can still validate your code. Lightweight. Simple Editor is very, very light. By default, it only requires utilities, which over the wire, 32K. Simple Editor on its own over the wire is 23K. You're going to need some CSS to throw on top of that, around 4K. I didn't go in and inspect all the images and everything, but so around 59K over the wire, you get that. Not too bad. So let's see about making the complex not so complex. We're going to talk a little bit about editor on its own. Simple Editor by itself looks all nice and cool. Say I want to get rid of the toolbar because I don't like it. I don't want the text on there. I don't want it up on my screen. Same code that we had before. We're going to add one line right here. When you instantiate Simple Editor, the default toolbar configuration is available to you right then. So then you can go in and use standard JavaScript to set properties true and false. You can use it to remove things from the arrays and objects that are inside the config. So you don't have to worry about a giant config to go through and remove one button or set one item. You can just set it in real time. Once we add that line, we go from this to that. So now title bar is gone. All we had to do was put one line in. So now let's mix Simple Editor and Editor a little bit. You notice that Simple Editor comes with a standard select element. So you don't get the nice, pretty WYSIWYG fonts and all the good stuff that you'll want. If you just go in and add container, menu, and button, we're going to add one more line to Simple Editor, and we're going to tell it to give it a button type of advanced. That is going to turn what we saw here into this. So now, one line, adding a couple of YUI controls on the page, we now have this nice, pretty WYSIWYG font menu. Works exactly the same way the select box did, only it's prettier. You might also notice that it threw in a couple extra buttons. Now these buttons come for free if you just include container on the page, because these are the color buttons. So all it relies on is container. So you can mix and match. If you don't want the WYSIWYG menu, fine, don't include menu and button. Just include container and you've got a color picker. So then you can set your font color, forecolor, anything you want. So that just goes to show how you can mix the controls a little bit and actually get the editor that you want and minimize the amount of requests that you have to make to pull in the other controls. So now we've got simple editor out of the way. Let's see about putting editor in. The only thing we need to change is we need to change the include from simple editor to editor. Now editor extends simple editor. So everything that we've done so far will completely work inside of editor. So by changing that script include and not changing our code, we still see this. It will work exactly the same way. Any customizations you've done to it works exactly the same way because they're essentially the same class. So we go into our first code snippet and we change simple editor to editor. That's all we're going to do. We reload the page and we go from this to that. Now you get all the cool stuff. You get the added extras. This is what a lot of people really want for hardcore blog posts. The simple editor, people want for comments. Lightweight, want it really small, want it to fit on the screen, hardly any downloads. This gives you everything. So what do we get with editor? The biggest thing that we're going to get out of editor is we're going to get more toolbar options. There is quite a few buttons that get added. The original toolbar, you notice, only went through a few of these. When we get into editor, we add a couple new buttons down here. One of them is a remove format button. The other one is a show hidden elements button. It's actually kind of cool. When you click it, it highlights every invisible element inside the editor document so you can see your layout. You can see the elements that you're working with, any element that has no style on it. You're able to actually see it and people can work with it. The next thing it's going to add is going to add the alignment options for left, right, center, and justify. It's going to give us support for H tags, so header tags. We'd have header 1 through 6. And then it also gives us our lists. So we have ordered lists, unordered lists, indent and outdent support. All of those get added in for free when you use editor over simple editor. The next thing we're going to get is we're going to get rich URL editing. In simple editor, when you go to add a URL, it's just going to pop up a simple JavaScript prompt. And it's going to ask you what link you want. That's it. That's the only option you get. When you load in editor, you get these nice, pretty editor windows. These editor windows are pretty unique. They're actually a container. They're a panel. And they're designed to attach themselves to an element inside of it, inside of the editor. And one of the tricky little things it does is it tracks this little pointer here. The window is smart enough to try to keep itself as close to the editor as it possibly can, and it will move this arrow to align itself with the element that you're working on. So it's kind of a cool visual way to see what you're dealing with. This editor window in particular adds in the extras of opening it in a new window, setting a description, and removing the link altogether. So excuse me, it adds in a new amount of data that you can manipulate over the JavaScript prompt that we had in simple editor. The next thing it's going to give us is going to give us rich image editing. Now this is one of the cool things. In simple editor, when you go to edit an image or add an image, it just gives you a simple JavaScript prompt for the link, and that's it. That's all you can do with it. In editor, we get this. We get a full image option dialog here that pops up. We can put a URL in. We can change its size, because in Opera and Safari they don't handle the resize handles that are in IE and Firefox. When you go to dynamically resize an image, this will allow Safari and Opera users to resize that image however they feel appropriately. Then you can set the text flow on it, so you can align it to the left, right, center, block. You can do whatever you want with it. Padding's pretty cool. In real time, if you cycle through this spin button, it'll actually readjust the padding on the image to let you watch it in real time. Everything inside this window is real time. So if you paste a link in and blur off of it, the image is going to get loaded into the editor. You change its size, the image size is going to change. Everything will, including the padding, and then we have border options as well. So you can drop down a list to select a border and then a border style. And then the button at the end is actually the same color picker that we had up here for the font name. So you get to pick a color for your border as well. So all of that comes in for free with Editor. Header support, indent and outdent. So my favorite part, hacking it. I built this thing from the ground up to be completely hacked, completely extended, hooking into it in any way, shape, or form you can to manipulate it, because I'm a big believer in being able to hack into something and make it do things that it should do, even though it doesn't. So my main thing with this is events, events, and events. I have tried to litter this thing with as many events as possible so you can hook into it in every place that the editor does something important and keep it from doing that, or change what it's doing, or interact with it afterward. So here are some of the common events that you may be interested in if you're wanting to extend the editor to do anything that it doesn't normally do, or even override what it's doing now. The first one is the one I use in most of my examples. It's called toolbar loaded. So you can say editor.on toolbar loaded. That will tell you that the editor toolbar is in existence, it's in the DOM, and it works. From there, you can manipulate it. So you can hook into it, you can remove buttons, you can add buttons, you can destroy certain parts of it. You can do anything you want to the toolbar at this point before it's rendered. So that way you can hook in beforehand and grab whatever you want to grab and do whatever you want to do. So, like I said, toolbar events can be used here. The main toolbar event is called button click. Really what it does is it's a propagation of the button click all the way up to the toolbar. So any button inside the toolbar will fire this event. And inside of that event, you'll have access to the button object that created the event, right? So if bold was clicked and you're listening for button click, you'll be able to actually know that bold was clicked. So you can put a giant case statement in there if you want, or a giant switch statement with all your cases in there, say if this one was clicked, if that one was clicked, the standard way of listening for that event propagation. Well, the other thing that toolbar does is it's got this unique set of events in it that I tend to call dynamic events. They don't really have a name. So you can't really say that they're, like button click. A value click event is not a name. Value click will never get called. What if I put a button in the toolbar and I gave it a name of foo? Okay? In this scenario, you would be able to listen for foo click. And you'll be able to capture that event before button click gets called. So then I can limit the fact that I don't want to listen to button click because I don't want to have to deal with all the chatter that's running through it. I don't want it called all the time. I can just listen for my specific button, and I'll deal with whatever that button's going to do at that time. Editor is loaded with events like this because it makes it extremely powerful. If, say for example, you wanted to pull it up, inside the toolbar loaded event, you wanted to listen for bold click. And inside of bold click, you want to make it turn purple instead of making it bold. And then return false from that listener. Bold would never happen. Because by the time this one returned false, this one wouldn't go. And if editor's listening at this one, editor's going to ignore it. It's not going to do anything because this one has already accepted the responsibility of handling it. So the unique thing with that is that you can add in buttons with your own name and then listen only on that button to do what you want it to do. So then in case that button's not present, you don't have a lot of code sitting inside of button click here thinking that it's present, which is one of the things that makes editor and simple editor work the way they do, is that simple editor and editor don't care what buttons are in the toolbar. They're going to use whichever ones that they know are available. So if they're not available, they don't care. They don't listen for them. They don't react to them. They don't do anything about it if the button's not there to tell it to. So the next one, this one is one that a lot of people kind of overlook. It's called editor content loaded. Now, most people don't know that the way rich text editors work is that that editing area that you're dealing with is actually an iframe. And there's a real live HTML document inside of that iframe. It has every property that a normal HTML document does, except it doesn't have JavaScript. You can only access it from the parent to get into the iframe. This editor content loaded will fire when that document is loaded. So once all the data that you've put in is actually loaded inside the iframe, this event will come up. Once that event comes up, then you have access to the content that's inside of that editor. So for example, one of the ways this can be used is, say you got a CMS system, and you've got these 6 boxes on the page, and they all have different background colors, and they have different font colors associated with them. But you want to use Editor to manipulate those one at a time. Like I double-click it, and Editor pops up. Inside of here, you could actually listen for when the content is loaded and dynamically load a style sheet onto the document inside the iframe to change its appearance. You could hook into the body of that element, and you could set styles that way to say, okay, this element that I double-clicked on had a background of blue, so I need to set the editor's background color on its body to blue, so it looks like the content that I just edited. So if you have a CMS system that, say, has background images and background colors that you know propagate through the entire system, from in here, you could load that style sheet. And you could get your background image, and you could get your default font faces and colors and things like that that your website actually has, and be able to show it inside the editor. So it's not just a white screen with black text. It could be a yellow background with blue text, because that's what your site looks like. So that's an extremely powerful event to be dealing with. The next one is after render. After render fires after, of course, the render has taken place. At that point in time, all of the editor UI elements are available. Everything that's inside the editor is in the DOM, and it's ready to be dealt with. So then you can go through and you can hook in whatever you want. You could throw a text input field inside the title bar of the toolbar. You could move the toolbar off to the other side of the screen because you didn't want it to be seen. You could throw an animation on it and make it zoom in. You could do anything you wanted to with it at that point, because then you know that the editor is there and it's available. Now, before node change and after node change, these two are really, really tricky when it comes time to actually start diving into what the editor is doing. So let me explain a little bit about what a node change is as far as the editor is concerned. The editor defines a node change as you did something. I don't know what you did, but you did something inside of this box to tell me, that you've changed something inside the content. It uses a very tricky combination of mouse events, key events, toolbar actions, and timers to figure out what you're doing and if you've done something that is important to me. The timers that it uses is actually a self-canceling timer to keep it from overrunning itself, to make sure that if one gets called while another action is taking place, it won't run, to make sure that it doesn't keep stomping on itself and running all the time. And it also keeps track of the fact that it won't try to check itself for node changes if you haven't done anything inside the editor that was valid for me to think that you've changed something. So if you haven't clicked in and highlighted something, I don't care. You can leave your cursor sitting there and the editor's just going to sit there. It's not going to try to do anything. It's not going to try to update anything. It'll just sit there. So some of the cool things with these mouse events and key events and the toolbar actions, they go back to the fact that, as I mentioned before, you can listen for all those. You can tell when it's doing stuff like that. So with that before node change and after node change, you actually know that I've done something. So for instance, you clicked on a bold element. I know that I have to go through and reset my toolbar based on the font for that element. I have to highlight the fact that it's bold. Maybe it's got an italic wrapped around it somewhere. I got to highlight that. Well, inside that after node change, say you put a special element in that you were dealing with your own button. So when you clicked on a button, it threw a span in the editor and it put a certain class on it. At that point, you can check to see if your element is the one that's being dealt with. And if it is, you can highlight your own toolbar. You can open a window. You can pop up an alert. You can do whatever you want to, because at that point, you will know that they're interacting with something. At any other time, you just don't do anything. So those are really, really powerful ways to get in and figure out what's happening inside of the editor. So here's some advanced events that we can use, and you're going to recognize a lot of these because they are just simple pass-through DOM events. All I do is I give you all the events that are happening inside of my editor, with the exception of a couple of them that I have to trap for various browsers. So I'm still working on trying to get around those. A couple of the browsers kind of get finicky on click. So that's why you'll notice click is not in here. Safari in particular will actually follow a link inside the iframe and not let you edit it. So I have to trap a few of those to keep it from following those links. And a lot of times if you were to click on an image inside of Safari 2, it would do like weird things like copy it out into the body somewhere and just leave it. So that's why a lot of people ask why there's no click, and it's because I have to do some really, really funky things with click to make up for Opera in Safari. But these are just straight pass-through DOM events. So once you have hooked into those, you have the same ability that you would normally have. You know what element triggered it. You'll know what its parent is. You can walk up through the tree. You can check for class names. You can check for ancestors. So that's where the other part of the toolbar comes in. Is it, say you only wanted to deal with an element when somebody double-clicked on it. You don't care if they clicked on it, but they specifically double-clicked on it. You can listen for the double-click event. You can check, see if your element is the one that you want. You can highlight your button on the toolbar. You can pop up a dialog. You can do whatever you want to do with it. So those are the more advanced events that people may want to get into. But they want to be careful with those because you want to make sure that you stay away from things like putting in a lot of stuff inside the key press, because you may not want to actually trap every single character that they type. You may be looking for a certain character that they're typing. Like maybe you want to trap an enter key, or you want to trap the escape key, or you want to do something like that. But a few of those you need to be really careful, or you're going to really slow down your machine, because you don't want those running and calculating every single time. And then editor. Now all of those events are good through Simple Editor completely. Now when we get into editor, editor uses a few more. The only events that editor has different from Simple Editor has to do with all the windows. So we have before open window, after open window, we have close window. Those are pretty simple. Those are the link windows and the image windows that pop up. But they also have a couple of dynamic events that go in there. We have open command, or window command open and window command closed. Now, these are dynamic events based off of the toolbar dynamic events that we had value click. This gives us, this gives us the ability to specifically listen for a certain window to open and not all windows. These top three here will fire on every window open, but these we can actually limit it to a certain window. Now there's a hidden class inside of editor that not a lot of people know that's there, and there's an editor window class that you can actually spawn a new editor window, and you'll get a panel, and you'll get all the benefits of the editor windows, like it moving the little pointer to highlight the element that you're going to, and it'll give you a panel. You have full access to that panel. You can write to the body to it. You can put a header on it. You can put a footer on it. You can do whatever you want. So I'll show an example of those in a little bit, but that's what this is. So when you create a window, you actually have to give it a name. So for instance, the insert image button, its name is insert image. So if I wanted to listen only for the insert image button to open, I would call window insert image open. That's the event I would listen for, because then I know only the insert image window is the one that's actually being opened, not the link window or any other various window that anybody else has created. So then at that point, I know that the window is open, then I have access to the contents of that panel. Once I have access to the contents of that panel, I can use standard DOM to go through and inject new DOM elements. I can remove DOM elements. I can customize it any way I want. So, examples, my favorite part. I love this one. So I'm going to go through a few examples. My personal favorite one is the Flickr image search. Even though I wrote it, I love it because it was my first official YUI example out of the 200 that are on my website. This was the first one that I officially built. Most of you have probably seen it. It's on the developer site. It has the nice, pretty little autocomplete over here that Jenny wrote. And it's actually a cut and paste of one of her autocomplete examples. dropped into a panel that I've created that slides in and out of the side of the editor. It's a very, very simple plugin. All I'm doing is when the toolbar is loaded, I add a new button. I listen for that button. And when you click the button, I slide a panel out, and I got some cool stuff in it. That's all I'm doing. And there's really not much to this. The cool part with it is that when you do your search, come back with these pile of images. When you click on one of them, it automatically gets dropped into the editor. So once it goes into the editor, it's just like a normal image. You double click on it, you get the nice big image editing. We actually throw in the URL and the description from Flickr. We even link back to the photo. That way it automatically goes in all nice and pre-formatted for you. And that was a very simple one line is all it took to actually put that image into the editor the way we wanted it. All it's calling on this is editor exec command, insert HTML, and a string of HTML. That's it. That's all it did. Very, very simple to do. The next one, this one is a cool one. This one is the first extension to my editor that was written by that was written in the wild. Somebody just completely said, hey, the editor lacks this one thing, and I think I'm going to write it. I thought that was really cool. I actually chatted with Dennis a couple of times after he was done with it and helped him out a little bit, you know, to tweak it and make it even better. But this is a really cool one. He actually hooked into a lot of these events that we've been talking about. And when the image window opens, he's actually placed in an image upload button and the ability to upload the image on the fly through Connection Manager. So you browse for the image and you click Upload Image, and it goes to the server, posts it, returns back a URL, and then he puts the URL in here, which then resizes it and sets it all up for you. So it's a really, really cool extension, and he did it all on his own. He didn't even talk to me beforehand when he did it. He did it all by himself, and then he contacted me after we found it. So I actually ran across it on a blog post and then started talking to him about it because I'm like, hey, this is really cool. I mean, it's really cool to see somebody do that. And you can visit his example here. He's got all the code. You can download it. He's got it in, I think, Ruby and PHP. So you can pull down and see exactly behind the scenes what he's doing. And if you want, it's on the more reading about the YUI Rich Text Editor on the landing page. So the more reading is over on the right-hand side at the bottom. So there's a couple of cool links over there. But you can get to Dennis's webpage from there that has the whole article explaining about why he did it and how he did it. The next one, this is one of mine again, but I built it because, as most of you may or may not know, I have 200 plus YUI examples, and I post to my blog a lot. And I really, really hate the rich text editor that's built in it. I'm not going to name any names, but I thought it'd be cool to write a WordPress plugin that puts my editor in. So I did. Here is the dashboard on my website with the YUI Rich Text Editor in it. And if you'll notice, there's a nice little Flickr button up there. I actually included the Flickr example, so I like to post my Flickr photos up to my own website. So I thought it'd be cool if I could actually do that. So I went ahead and included it in. For the next release, I'm going to try to put Resize on it, the new Resize utility, so you'll be able to actually resize the text editor to however big you want it to be. And one of the little features of the plugin is you can go in and actually turn comment posting on. If you turn comment posting on, it'll overtake the comment box on your blog and turn it into a simple editor instance. So it'll pull in a really small amount and change the comments on your blog. So you can allow rich text to be posted on your comments. That plugin is fully available. It's actually on one of the WordPress plugin systems. I don't remember what it is, but it's here. You can take a look at it there. Actually, one of the other things that I've done there is I've also gone through the pain of rewriting the partial config inside of WordPress to allow the new HTML that my editor generates because the default WordPress was too strict. So that page actually has the config that you need to put into WordPress to actually make it accept all the HTML that's being generated by the editor. The next one, this one is really cool. Zimbra. Yahoo acquired Zimbra, the online collaboration suite. And I think it was their last release or the release before. In their standard HTML mode, in the compose view, they're now including a full editor instance for the compose view. They didn't do it in the Ajax version, but they did it in the standard HTML because I think people got tired of the big text area. So here's a nice screenshot of Zimbra on the compose screen with the full editor in view. Now what makes this one totally cool, you can see that new button they put in there? That's a spell check button. They already had a spell check web service, but they didn't have a front end. I don't have a front end on this either. So they used that hidden window class to build their own. So when you click it, it actually goes through and does a check on the content of it, and it will highlight any misspelled words in yellow. When you click that misspelled word, you get a customized editor window that does what you want it to do. They have a list of the suggestions that came back. And when you mouse over them, it tells you, do you want to replace this with this? So when you click one of those, it replaces it, and then it jumps to the next one that's inside the editor and pops open the window with the new suggestions in it. That was a really slick implementation because not a lot of people know about that windowing system. You know, they thought it was just the 2 windows that came with editors, so they didn't know you could do this cool stuff. So if you go here, they actually have an online demo. When you go to log in, make sure you choose the standard HTML version and hit compose, and you'll see the editor in action. You'll be able to play with the spell check, see it work. If you look under the hood through Firebug and check the post, you'll actually watch it go back and forth to the web service that's doing the spell checking, so you can kind of see what's going on. I also have an example on my site that actually documents the code on how to do this. My example doesn't have a real web service. It only spell checks 4 words because I have a shared host and I couldn't put a spell or p spell on there. But you'll be able to get the gist of what it's doing. The next one, this is my favorite. Thanks to Brian over here. The new launch of Shine is, from what I know, the single largest implementation of my editor to date. Right now they're pushing an average of 700 blog posts a day through this editor. Makes me happy. I think it's awesome. This is the absolute first real Yahoo property. I'm not calling Zimbra not real, but this is the first big one that's actually fully implemented it, and they completely customized it. They did a wonderful job. I personally love this one. I played with it for hours. When you pull up the blog post, this is what you get. It looks simple. You can notice here that they completely changed the toolbar. It has nothing it doesn't look anything like the original toolbar. They took the title bar off. They even changed some colors in here. They added an HTML source editor. They took one of my code examples and they built it in to actually edit HTML inside the editor and then put it back into the editor when you want to go back into WYSIWYG mode. The next thing they did, which I thought was totally cool, was they started modifying that image window by using a couple of those events to listen for that image window to open. Here's their image window. Looks nothing like mine. This is the standard that comes with it. This one is theirs. You may notice that they took away the close button up here that normally comes with it. But then they added a done button down here in the bottom. So make it a little easier for their users. So when you click done, it does what it's supposed to do. The next thing you may notice is they've got the file upload. And if, Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they used Dennis's code as a starting point for that to implement this in real time. And when you browse for a file and upload it, it'll actually return it back to the editor and fill in all the data at the bottom, just like Dennis's does. The other thing you'll notice is that they removed a button from one of these. That one took me a little bit to notice. I didn't even catch that one. But they removed one of the buttons that was on the toolbar in there. The next thing they did was they took all of this extras and they hid it under a more editing option. So they did all of that in DOM, in one of those events that listen for the open image window, and were able to completely override the GUI for this window. And I think that's awesome. They did a really, really good job on that. But now we're going to be up to my favorite part. This new little button up here, this one's cool. I have to tell you, I love this thing. When you click this button, it drops this in. That looks like a media reel, doesn't it? And then you get this. They built their own window using the same thing that Zimber did for the spell check. They built their own window. They allow you to go out to Yahoo Video, Bix, or YouTube and grab a flash video, the embed code, and drop it into this text area. When you paste it into this text area and click the preview button, this is what you get. It actually will build that video and play it right inside of there for you. Now you can't play that video inside the editor in real time because with design mode on, Flash doesn't work so well. So they keep the placeholder in place so you can see where it's at, how big it is, you can move it around, but then you double click on it and you get this. So you can go back in and tweak it. You can change its height, you can change its width, you can do a few other things and hit preview and play it again. And then it saves it out. You can see that as a registered Yahoo user at shine.yahoo.com/write. You can log in, create your own blog, and you can see this thing in action and play around with it. Like I said, I played around with it for an hour. I thought it was awesome. They did a terrific job on it. And that's all I got. So we got any questions? The question was, is the video embed going to actually be put back into editor? Yeah, so yes, I will get that in there. I can't commit to when, but I do want it in there. It has been on the list for a while. The question was, RTE is kind of easy to internationalize, except for those windows. And a lot of the URL windows and the image windows, a lot of that's private, and I'm going to make those public so you don't have to jump through hoops to be able to get into them. So what I plan on doing in 2.6 is working a lot with that because there was another issue with the keyboard shortcuts that I didn't realize, and some alternative layout keyboard shortcuts you can't even do in the editor because they require a double shift to hit one of the keys. So I've got to look at the whole internationalization even more, and that's where I ran into the windows. But I will be fixing that in 2.6. The question was, is there an easy way to catch the paste events that go inside the editor? That's a tricky question because some of the browsers will allow you to and some of them won't. Depending on how the implementation is, you may be able to block the key command to keep them from doing it and give them a button that allows them to do it. You could also hook an event in to try to trap there is a paste event, but I believe IE is the only one that supports it. Firefox, you have to change some config in order to actually make it work. But you could put the event in for the ones that do support it and do something with it. But then you can say the recommended process is to click a button and give them a text area to paste into and then process the data that way, which is one of the things that I was looking at doing to actually support that across all the browsers. And then you could go far enough as to actually block the context menu so they couldn't context menu it in. You could grab the keyboard shortcut and stop it for the browsers that didn't support it. So the only thing that would be left would actually be the toolbar. You know, that's a really tricky one, and I've been really trying to work on that. I will let you know if I figure it out, though. Okay, the question was how to deal with does the editor render all the time on the page, and how to make it work with multiple areas, right? Okay, there's actually an example on the YUI developer site that I have 6 different regions on a page that you can edit with one editor instance, and it's never shown. It actually will render the editor way off to the side of the screen, and when you go interact with one of these separate areas, I think I have it set on double click, so when you double click it, it'll actually put the editor on top of that area and load the content in, lets you make your change and hit the close button, which is actually like the toolbar collapse, and it will process whatever you did and put it back in and then move itself back off the side of the screen. So that's a really good example. I think it's called multiple edit areas, one editor, something like that. It's a really good example on how to use one editor to edit multiple elements on a page.